I was an engineer for one of the biggest bread manufacturers in the UK for about 7 years now. It paid well enough, and I enjoyed keeping those massive production lines running smoothly. Our plant had 3 production lines making 220 loaves every minute when running well. The whole operation needed constant attention. Our team had 4 engineers, including our team leader. We each had different skills. 2 were mechanical engineers, 1 was electrical, and I was the only one who could do both, plus software on our shift. This mix was important because the bread making equipment was complex. Things were fine until our engineering manager got fired. He was replaced by this numbers guy who couldn't manage people. We called him the accountant behind his back. The accountant had already pushed out several good engineers. Even worse, he would report operators for small mistakes, getting them fired for things that previous managers would have just warned them about. The guy seemed to enjoy using his power. About a month after taking over, the accountant called us to a meeting and gave us his new plan without asking what we thought. The accountant told us his new rules. Engineers couldn't be in the workshop unless fixing something or changing shifts. When I tried to speak, he stopped me and kept talking. He said engineers would each be assigned to 1 production line, with the 4th engineer handling all 12 slicers and baggers. Our team leader tried to explain why this wouldn't work with our different skills, but the accountant ignored him and said engineers must patrol their assigned lines unless on breaks, with no exceptions. After the meeting, we talked about this silly new system in the canteen. Our team leader said the new system would be a disaster because some repairs needed at least 2 engineers just to lift the parts. The electrical engineer asked what would happen when there was an electrical problem on a line with only a mechanical engineer. One mechanical engineer mentioned the problem of all 3 lines breaking down at once. I said the accountant didn't understand bread making. If the oven stopped, we only had 5–10 minutes before all the dough was wasted, and we couldn't always wait for the right engineer. We all saw the chance for some malicious compliance. Our team leader suggested we follow the rules exactly. If you're assigned to line 1, that's all you work on, no helping others. The second mechanical engineer said if there was an electrical problem on his line, he would wait until break time for help. The electrical engineer agreed and said he wouldn't point out problems he saw on other lines. I said as the only software person, if the controls went down on lines 1 or 2, they would just have to wait for me. The next shift, we started our plan. I was on line 3, which soon had an electrical fault. I called for help over the radio. I radioed that line 3 had a tripped circuit breaker on the proofer control panel. I explained that I was mechanical that day and couldn't fix it, and asked for the electrical engineer. Our team leader said the electrical engineer was on line 1 and could only check during the next break in 4 hours. I said all the dough would be ruined soon. The team leader just said we were following the new rules. About 2 hours later, a big belt broke on line 2. Usually, 3 of us would lift the heavy replacement belt while the 4th secured it. But instead, one mechanical engineer called for help with the belt on line 2. Our team leader said everyone had to stay in their areas, as the accountant ordered. The engineer said he couldn't do the job alone. Our team leader told him those were the rules and to try his best. By the end of that shift, the line efficiency dropped from 75% to 40%. The waste doubled from 25% to 50%. The bakery lost thousands of pounds in just 8 hours. The night shift did the same thing, following the accountant's rules exactly. By morning, it was clear his system was failing. The next day, I came to work expecting more problems, but found our team leader looking happy. The team leader told us the assigned area system was suspended for review. I was surprised it happened so fast. He said the plant manager was called at 3 a.m. when they couldn't make the morning deliveries. The accountant got told to ask people who knew how the place worked before making changes. The electrical engineer asked if we were back to the old system, and the team leader said yes, right away. He also said the accountant was told to stick to his spreadsheets and leave engineering alone. We never heard about assigned areas again. The accountant still walks around with his clipboard but stays away from the engineering department now. I'm a construction and permit lawyer. My job requires patience. Diving through regulations and legal documents isn't for the impulsive. But there's a difference between professional patience and what I went through living next to the neighborhood party house from hell. For years, I lived peacefully in my semi-detached home. My neighbor was a sweet elderly lady who I barely heard through our shared wall. We'd exchange pleasantries when we saw each other. When she died, I had no idea the nightmare that was about to begin. The new owner wasn't going to live there himself. This guy, I'll call him Jack Sparrow, ran a construction company and dabbled in real estate. He bought the place and filled it with 4 6 foreign construction workers who worked for his business. Rumors went around that Jack was exploiting these workers, paying them according to their home country's wage standards rather than our much higher minimum wage, possibly even unreported labor. But that wasn't my immediate problem. My problem was the noise. Unrelenting, wall-shaking noise. These guys would start partying Thursday evening and wouldn't stop until Monday morning at 5 a.m. when they left for work. I'm talking about music so loud I couldn't hear my own TV, or music through headphones. They had turned the living room right against our shared wall into their permanent party space. At first, I tried to be understanding. Maybe it was just a one-time celebration. But after 3 weekends of sleepless nights, I decided to talk to them. I went next door and asked them to turn down the music, explaining that it was extremely loud and could be heard throughout my house. One of the workers said sorry and promised to fix the situation, but nothing changed. I returned several more times, each visit making me more frustrated. During one visit, I complained that the situation was ridiculous and that the music needed to be turned down because it was disturbing everyone on the street. The worker simply denied that the music was loud. I tried to explain that if I could hear their music over my own TV and through headphones, it was definitely too loud. After getting nowhere with the tenants, I contacted Jack. I told him about the constant loud music problem. Jack dismissed me, saying it wasn't his problem and that I should deal with it myself. So I called the police. Repeatedly. Sometimes twice in one night. After about a dozen visits, it became clear that even law enforcement couldn't fix the situation. The tenants developed a new strategy. They'd blast music at maximum volume for brief periods to wake me up or bother me, then turn it off before police could arrive. As a lawyer, I knew my legal options were limited. I could get a judge to issue a notice saying their music was too loud, but enforcement would remain a problem. I was stuck waiting for something to change. Then one day, I heard unusual noise next door. Looking through my garden window, I saw a crane tearing down part of a wall. Let me explain, over the years, previous owners had built a small side building adjoining the main house. The wall of this structure was the divider between our properties. Now they were demolishing it without telling me. As a construction lawyer, two things immediately came to mind. 1. This type of work requires a permit from the city. 2. There was no way they had that permit, as I regularly check permit applications for my job. This was my moment. The situation had changed, and revenge was within reach. I sent a quick email to the city reporting the unauthorized construction work, attaching photos. No response came immediately, which was expected. When construction materials started arriving the following week and work began again, I sent another email with new pictures. The response came less than an hour later. They told me they had called Jack after my first report, and he had claimed he didn't know about permit requirements and promised to stop work until he got proper permits. They called him again after my second email and ordered him to shut down operations. That day, I watched the construction crew pack up and leave from my home office window. Later, I received an angry call from Jack. He accused me of reporting him and threatened that I be sorry. He said he was going to come after me for damages caused by the delays. I responded that even if I had reported him, I hadn't done anything wrong. I pointed out that he was working without a permit, which was illegal, and that as someone in construction, he should have known better. I ended the call. Jack had no idea what I had started. He was like Jack Sparrow, and I had just rung the bell that would awaken the kraken destined to destroy him. After some research, I discovered something interesting. The previous owners of both houses had talked about the side building and agreed to share the cost and ownership of the dividing wall. That wall he partially demolished. It was 50% mine. This meant two things. I was entitled to damages, and more importantly, Jack needed my permission to do anything to that wall. When Jack finally applied for a permit weeks later, while his tenant's belongings remained outside under a tarp, I looked at the application and noticed he planned to modify the wall without mentioning my partial ownership. I filed a complaint stating that even if granted, the permit could never be used since Jack didn't have my permission regarding the wall, permission I had no intention of giving. This should have killed his permit application immediately. However, Jack had connections in the construction industry and somehow got his permit approved despite my objection. He even called to brag about it. But in my country, you can appeal a permit decision by paying a €100 fee, which I gladly did. The appeal went to a higher authority that didn't care about Jack's political connections. They revoked his permit based on the legal grounds I'd mentioned. Jack's project was now blocked until he fixed the issue with me, which wasn't happening. By this point, 7 months had passed. The tenants were living with an unfinished construction project in their yard, their belongings stored elsewhere with no end in sight. But there was more. Doing construction work without a permit is also a criminal offense. My report had triggered a criminal investigation against Jack. Not only did he face potential fines and jail time, but since he used his own construction company for the illegal work, his entire business was at risk. One possible sentence for this type of offense is being banned from construction activities, either temporarily or permanently. During this ordeal, Jack tried to sell the property, but faced two major obstacles. First, the property had an illegal status due to the demolished side building, which would stay with the property until resolved. This decreased its value since no one wants to buy a property requiring more time and money to legalize. Second, Jack's business model involved putting workers in cheap houses, letting them trash the place, then demolishing and redeveloping or selling to developers. But due to the construction crime and property status, he couldn't proceed with step 2. Any renovation permit would require addressing the illegal demolition, which he couldn't do without my cooperation. He couldn't sell it as is either. The place was trashed, and any developer would back out upon finding the legal issues, and a neighbor, me, who would oppose major development plans. Today, Jack faces a criminal court proceeding that threatens his business and livelihood. City services now scrutinize all his projects, aware that he cuts corners on permits and regulations. He can't sell the property without taking a massive loss, can't develop it, and can't get my permission for any plans involving our shared wall. The rowdy tenants still live there, but in reduced space. They've quieted down, possibly because Jack blames them for his predicament. All it took was a nudge from me to set the municipal bureaucracy the kraken upon Jack Sparrow, ruining him. I barely had to lift a finger. The system did all the work. Yesterday, me and my wife went on our weekly shopping trip to Aldi's. Aldi's has this system where you need to insert a quarter to get a shopping cart, and you get it back when you return the cart. I forgot to keep our quarter in the car. You'd think after going there every week for nearly 2 years, I'd remember this, but nope. My wife gave me that look where she's not surprised but still disappointed. We usually buy enough food to last a week, and neither of us wanted to carry everything in our arms. I noticed a liquor store across the parking lot, and I figured they'd have some quarters I could get for a $1 bill. I walked in, and there was a young guy at the counter, probably in his early 20s, staring at his phone. I waved to get his attention and asked if I could get some change, explaining I needed a quarter for the Aldi cart. The kid gave me the side eye. He said no without any explanation. I wasn't upset or surprised. Maybe they have a policy against giving change without purchase, or maybe the register was low on coins. When I was about to leave, I spotted some sugar-free soda that my wife loves. It was priced at $2.24. I had a $5 bill in my wallet, so I thought I'd buy this and get quarters in my change. I grabbed the soda and brought it to the counter. I told him I'd take the soda and handed him my $5 bill. This kid looks at me, rolls his eyes, and starts ringing me up. The total came to $2.24 with tax, meaning I was owed $2.76 in change. I didn't expect to get a lot of quarters, but the cashier gives me 2 $1 bills, a penny, 1 quarter, and a half-dollar coin. I didn't notice until I left the store. I felt something large in my palm and looked down to see this massive coin. A half-dollar coin is twice the size of a quarter, and they're pretty rare in everyday use. I stood there in the parking lot staring at the coin. I needed a quarter for an Aldi cart, and this smartass gave me a half-dollar that wouldn't fit in the cart slot. I walked back to where my wife was waiting by the Aldi entrance. She asked if I'd gotten a quarter, and I held up the half-dollar coin and told her not exactly. She asked what it was, and I told her it was a half-dollar and that the kid at the liquor store had been clever. When she asked if we could use it in the cart, I told her no. We both stared at the coin, then at each other, and started laughing. Here I was, a grown man stuck because of a cart system and a snarky cashier. I went back into the liquor store. The cashier looked up surprised to see me again. I told him I needed a quarter for the oldie cart since the half-dollar wouldn't fit, and asked if I could trade it for 2 quarters. The cashier said they don't do exchanges on change. I told him I had bought something to get change for the Aldi cart, and a half-dollar wasn't helping me. He said it wasn't his problem. I was getting frustrated. I asked to speak to the manager. The cashier said the manager wasn't there. When I asked when they would be back, he said he didn't know. Just then, an older man came from the back room and asked if there was a problem. I explained the situation, showing the half-dollar coin. The manager looked at the cashier and asked if he had given me a half-dollar when I had asked for quarters. The cashier shrugged and said I had asked for change, and that was change. The manager opened the register, gave me 2 quarters for my half-dollar, and gave the cashier a stern look. I thanked him. I walked out and headed back to Aldi's where my wife was waiting. I held up the quarters. She asked if I had been successful, and I said yes. I know I might be the bad guy for making a fuss over something so small, but I found the whole situation funny. I don't think I've held a half-dollar coin in over a decade. We got our cart, did our shopping, and kept that half-dollar coin as a reminder. I was 19 and got my driver's license late at 27. I found a 1987 Ford Escort outside a mechanic shop for $300. My parents thought it was a good deal, so I decided to buy it. When my sister found out, she burst into tears and said she had wanted it. She already had a working car and couldn't afford to buy the Escort anyway. Her reaction made sense considering her history was Escorts. At 16, she bought a blue 1989 Ford Escort without permission. She was riding with our great-grandfather, saw it for sale on the roadside, and bought it on the spot. My parents had to register it in their names and help with insurance. The clutch went bad almost right away, and my parents paid $900 for repairs, even with a discount through our mother's connections. My sister treated that car badly. She drove it recklessly, smoked in it while underage, and filled it with trash. She crashed it into a pole, damaging the front. Later, the car got impounded, and she didn't try to get it back. The lot probably sold it for scrap, and my parents likely paid the fees. Back to my Escort. My sister was bitter about me buying it. She was jobless then, dependent on her nasty boyfriend. She pretended to accept it, but her behavior showed otherwise. She criticized my inability to drive a manual transmission. When I told her I could learn, she scoffed. She kept saying her Escort was newer and accused me of copying her, like when I got a Game Boy after she had hers in the 90s. She pointed out every fault in my car. Yes, it had problems, but it was my first car. I tried to fix it up. The mechanic replaced the heater cord cheaply. The car ended up as a farm vehicle before being sold for scrap. There was another Escort of the same model for sale locally at the same price, but my sister never tried to buy it. The real problem happened over something small. One day, I found a seat cover with glow-in-the-dark skulls at a discount store for about $5 to $10. I bought it. When I got home, I showed it to my sister before putting it in my Escort. Her eyes lit up. She said I had bought her a seat cover. She grabbed the box from my hands and started walking away. I stood there stunned. Then she looked more closely at the design and her expression changed. She complained about the skulls, calling it ugly. She tossed it back to me as if I'd offered her garbage. She said she didn't want it and walked off, leaving me holding my seat cover. Later, when I called her out, she tried to gaslight me. She claimed it was just a joke and denied trying to take it. She stuck to that story. But I know my sister. This was another power move. She was trying to take it, probably to see how I'd react. I think she did it because I bought her escort. Over the years, she went through 7 cars in 10 years, each with its own drama, each treated with the same disregard. That day with the seat cover showed everything about our relationship. She felt entitled to what I had, even when she didn't want it. She couldn't stand seeing me have something she didn't. I installed that skull seat cover in my escort.